Hi, Mitchell Levy, global credibility expert. We are at one of the funnest times of my week when we get to talk to a leader about their values and really dive deep to see who they are and how they show up in the world. So buckle up, get ready. Here we go. Schneider, welcome. Just since you're here, why don't you tell people who you are?
Thank you so much for having me, Mitchell. I'm really excited to be here. And I am a person who is incredibly passionate. I'm a person who is very, at times, probably intense about the things that matter to me and the things that I believe in. I'm a person who looks for the good in everything. I really try to adopt the mindset of why is this happening for me instead of why is this happening to me, and focus on the things that are positive because that's a choice for us. And I think lastly, I'm a person who cares about people. I value relationships more than anything in my life. And I think we as a society have kind of taught ourselves how to not see ourselves as human beings. We see ourselves as titles a lot of times at work or in the community. And I'm really passionate about bringing humanity back into society and into the workplace.
Yeah, that's so much to unpack. Thank you. Well, let's kind of start by saying you weren't always that way. So what transpired, or who were you before this human who you are now? And we'll jump back to this person. I'm just gonna say for those listening, I what captured my attention the most is the world happens for you, or things happen for you, not to you. I just want to say, think about that. Anything that happens, good or bad, is happening for you. Actually, why don't you talk about that for a second before we jump into a little bit of your historical nature? Talk about why that's important. That mindset is such a big transformation that many people need to make. Why do they need to do that?
As we stand here right now, I currently have a giant boot on my left ankle. It's been immobilized for the last 10 days. And it's been a really perfect example for me to bring this mindset to life. A couple of weeks ago, I was out hiking, and on mile 11 of 15, I rolled my ankle, felt a pop, and had 4 miles to hike myself off the mountain in an excruciating amount of pain. Ankle blew up. It's like torn ligaments, fracture. It was quite the experience. And this has been an opportunity where I've been able to really try to practice that mindset and bring it to life and not think, oh my gosh, why did this happen to me? I mean, I exercise 6-7 days a week. I love moving my body. It's so important to me. It's so important for my mental health, not just my physical health. But I've been not able to do anything for the last couple of weeks. And this has been an opportunity where I've slowed down and I've said, okay, I can focus on this in one of two ways. I can say, why is this happening to me? I can be pissed. I can be upset with my body. I can feel like my body betrayed me. Or I can say, how is this happening for me? How am I gaining a different understanding of my body? How can I work together with my body and my mind as one to help get myself back to full health in a couple of months? And how do I learn to move my body and exercise a little bit differently when I am very immobilized at the moment? So that's just an example of right now where I'm navigating kind of that question, but it certainly has not been easy. It's not a practice that I've always had in my life, but mindfulness and really practicing meditation and building a strong mindfulness practice over the last several years has been something that's shaped that perspective for me and allowed me to really understand how life is unfolding for me rather than happening to me.
I have in my mind a definition of mindfulness, and many people know what it is or think they know what it is. What does it mean to you?
It's the ability to be present absent any judgment.
Why do people not act mindfully? I'm not sure that's the right word, but
Right.
what I mean, it seems so simple. And why aren't we that way on a day-to-day basis? Why isn't that typical or normal for us?
Because we have so many distractions in this world that pull us out of the present moment. When you think about the ability of being present, in order to be present, you have to have your attention or your focus in the present moment. That can be either in your external environment, that can be in your internal environment with your thoughts, with your feelings, with the physical sensations in your body. But it requires your attention to be in the present moment in order to have presence. Our world today has so many distractions that keep us from being present and from tuning in. You can pull out your phone and scroll Instagram. You can listen to podcasts as you're on your daily commute. You can turn on Netflix. There's so many different ways that we are constantly distracting ourselves because we have this idea that boredom and presence is the enemy. And our society has really allowed us to do that. And it makes it go from, like you said, such a simple concept to something that's actually really difficult in practice.
You said something. So I'm going to go back into history sometime, but you said something. So you think people think, and by the way, I agree with it, that boredom in presence is the enemy?
How often have you heard somebody say, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to be alone with my own thoughts"? Like, I mean, that's a statement I know I've been guilty of making. But yeah, it's every Instagram ad you get, every advertisement on a billboard, everything that you're seeing is like, how are you being productive? Be productive, be productive. Eke every ounce out of the day that you possibly can. Boredom is the enemy. We have all these anti-boredom cures, but that's where the growth happens. That's where presence happens, is when we allow ourselves to be bored and to slow down and to tune in.
Is it really bored when we allow ourselves to slow down and tune in?
I think that's all relative to the person. I find it particularly interesting to slow down and to just understand what's going on with my body, to observe my thoughts, to observe
Mm.
my emotions. I think there's a lot of insight that we can gain there and a lot of ability to be able to tune into life and the messages that kind of are all around us. But when we're constantly distracting ourselves and have this idea that we don't want to be bored and that boredom is boring, that keeps us from doing that. But yeah, I don't, for me, boredom's not boring. I actually try to seek out experiences where I'm bored.
I'm going to come up with a different word than like so boredom is the what we fear, but then when we're there, it's not boring for me. If I do you have a practice that you do that actually sells meditation would be one, but is there are there multiple practices you do to slow down and get present?
There are, yes. One thing that, so I do some somatic work as well. Like every morning, I have my morning routine with my morning meditation. So that's much more of the internal presence. But I also do some more somatic work of just some very simple things like brushing and just kind of touching all parts of your body in such a beautiful way to just kind of wake up and realize, okay, I'm physically present here. So that's another practice that I use. I do a lot of breath work. I do phoneless walks is another example where I'll just leave my phone at home and go out for like a 30-minute walk. And it's wild how liberating it feels just to have 30 minutes away from your device and to be out where nobody can contact you. You almost like feel like you're getting away with something. But it's such a beautiful experience to realize like, nobody can connect it. I'm just here with me. I'm just here in this physical world, and that digital world is all gone. So a lot of small things like that. I just spent 11 days in Joshua Tree doing nothing but hiking and sitting and just staring at mountains, which is absolutely beautiful. I think sometimes you could look at that and say it is a little boring, but that's where things calm down. That's where your mind starts to settle, and that's where you can learn about yourself.
Hmm. My daily practice uh, is that I still play Pokemon Go from almost the first days it came out, and so sometimes I'll put somebody in my ear and we'll have a conversation, but I'll walk for 7 to 10,000 steps, and I'll play Pokemon Go. and it allows my mind to really get clear. And then occasionally I'm going to stop. So I don't consider any of this boring, but maybe it's because I'm walking, so my body is moving forward. Maybe because I'm playing on the phone, so my fingers are doing things, but I'm not really. It's mindless. Not, there's some strategy, but mostly mindless. But then every now and then, what'll pop into my head is that next idea or that next thought. I don't consider any of that boring.
It is wild how that ability to disconnect and to stop thinking actually allows the thoughts to come into your head, and creates that space. When you try, sometimes you're forcing things, particularly for anybody who's creative who's listening to this too. I'm sure you can relate to this, that sometimes the more you try and the more you force things, the less creative you become. And it's about creating that space and slowing down and like playing the Pokemon Go and kind of just getting a chance to, in that moment, like focus on nothing else and allow your brain to just like power down a bit.
So, Max, the person we see today was clearly what I often find when I talk to people is the who they are and how they show up, and if they're executing on their superpower today, they had a kryptonite at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk a little bit about your past?
My kryptonite was when you go back to the first thing I answered when you asked who I was, and I said I was passionate and intense. I am incredibly passionate, incredibly intense, and I've growing up and in my professional career for the first 10 years, I didn't understand how to appropriately balance that intensity and balance that passion. What I didn't understand was that the harder you work and the more intense you are, the harder you need to rest on the other side of it. So about 2.5 years ago, I experienced some pretty significant burnout. I was in consulting for 10 years, and I hit a wall at the end of 2022. Anxiety attacks, shingles, kind of the whole 9 yards, and just felt like a shell of a human being. And at that point, I realized that the operating system that I had built as a human being in this world had been great to get me up to that point, but it wasn't going to be what carried me forward. So I had to do a little bit of a reboot and figure out more about who I am as a person, and learn to really work within that, as opposed to continuing to just push through everything.
Wow. So you mentioned a couple of things. What was the breaking point for you?
The breaking point for me was a night in October of 2022 when I was curled up in a ball in our living room after just a really not a good day at work. And I think a lot of us can relate during the pandemic with the 8 to 10 hours of Zoom calls and getting done and having work to do on top of that, and the constant piling up of responsibilities and demands. It all came to a head that night in October where I realized I cannot do this any longer. I didn't know what was going to be next, but I knew that when I'm curled up in a ball having another anxiety attack on the floor of our living room, was some things just aren't worth it. And I knew at that point that I needed to make some changes in my life.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. By the way, crazy. Sorry it happened to you. It happens to anyone. Why do you think you got there in the first place? Was it society taught you that this is how you should be, or what brought you here? And then we'll talk about how do you. Yeah.
When I do things, I go all in. And I bring an intensity and I bring a commitment that is 100%. And as I grew up and had a chance to kind of start building my skill set and understand a little bit more about myself and the world, I really found business as a place in a field that I could excel in. And I had a lot of success in my career over the first 10 years in that space in the consulting world. But there were no guardrails. And it was, as somebody who goes all in, when you don't have guardrails to protect yourself, and there wasn't within scope of the work that I was doing. And as a human being, I hadn't figured out my own guardrails and how to recognize things in myself, because it was always just this idea of pushing through it. So that, for me, I take full responsibility for the burnout that happened. It was a result of my own choices and the things that my mindsets, my beliefs about the world, my own behaviors. So that, in my perspective, is 100% as a result of me. But our society doesn't also do anything to help people from a cultural perspective, as far as building those guardrails and the things that we value as a society, the ways that we define success. And for me, that uncoupling of what I had always believed success looked like, based upon kind of what I learned growing up and through school and through work, uncoupling that from who I am and understanding what my own definition of success is, was a really powerful experience. And I remember the last day that I was with the firm that I worked for, the morning after I sat down to practice yoga on my first day of being unemployed, after I'd quit, and I just started crying. I started bawling my eyes out. And it was this relief, this release of this weight that I think that I'd been carrying for the prior 34 years of what success was supposed to be, how I saw myself, how the world saw me. And it was the beginning stages of shedding that. But I'll never forget sitting down on the mat, and just out of nowhere, I'm getting chills talking about it now, but I just started bawling and totally felt that physical and emotional release of what I had been carrying for up to that point in life.
What was next?
Next was taking my experience and knowing that it's not unique, and that people go through these ebbs and flows in life. And whether no matter the field you're in, the type of work that you do, or whether you stay at home as a parent, it doesn't matter. We go through these periods in life where we lose touch with ourselves, and we focus so much on other things that we leave ourselves behind. And I knew that. And I also know that I knew the professional world exceptionally well. And I had an opportunity to be able to take my experience of going through that and my knowledge of mindfulness and the world of wellness, and marry that with my knowledge of the professional world, my experience there, and create something that can help people who are going through similar experiences in order to kind of get back in touch with who they are as human beings.
I should have been more clear. What was next for you? So you're laying on the floor.
Oh, in that moment?
Sorry. I love your answer. And yeah.
So it was a lot of therapy, a lot of reflection, a lot of just understanding what was going on and the journey that I'd been on and why I was feeling the way that I was. I think it was 2 years of what I would describe as getting caught up with myself, and learning who I was. And I think that about 6 months ago, I started to feel like I was really settling into that and had a much clearer picture. But it was a lot of therapy, a lot of mindfulness, a lot of reflecting, a lot of talking, and just sitting in it and not trying to run from it. And I think that was something that was really important for me, because up to that point, I mean, emotions were never something that I cared about. I would always shove them down so much. But I realized that that's also what got me into the situation, when your body's like literally having shingles and anxiety attacks because you're shoving stuff down. I made the decision of, all right, I'm going to sit in this for a while and I'm going to understand it and see what's there.
And so now you've got a handle on this, or some handle on it, or you overcame, or you solved this for yourself, right? So it's often, I find that people have this kryptonite. So you did the kryptonite. Now you have a superpower. What are you doing for others? Who do you play with?
In a professional setting?
Yeah. Sorry. I should be more clear on my questions,
no,
but yes.
I want to make sure I'm answering what you're asking. So, so I ended up starting a company that hosts mindfulness retreats for individuals, out of Nosara, Costa Rica. So over the last 24 months, we've run 11 retreats, bringing people from all over the world together into an environment where we have we have gorgeous villa, private chefs. We do mindful movement. We do like mindfulness classes like sound baths, breath work, yoga, meditation, painting. And we do a lot of facilitated conversations and just give people a space to disconnect from their day-to-day. We take care of everything for them so that all they have to do is just show up and focus on themselves. So that has been the predominant work that we have been doing over the last 2 years.
What got you there? What made you decide that this is where you want to play? Sorry, to me, work equals play, so that's why I throw in play words. So
I understood. I have always had just a draw to Latin America. I've been down there over 50 times for all kinds of different reasons, all over the region. Costa Rica is a place that I have really particularly fallen in love with. And there's a town in Costa Rica called Nosara, which is the wellness epicenter of what is called the Nicoya Peninsula, which is one of 5 blue zones in the world, places where people live longer and healthier than anywhere else. So after quitting my job, I went down there, just started meeting people, having conversations, understanding the town, building relationships, talking to people who I knew in the professional world who were going through some of those ups and downs, understanding what their challenges were, and getting a chance to shape ultimately what we do, the work that we do today. But it just started by asking questions, having conversations, understanding what challenges people were going through, and figuring out how might we be able to kind of connect some dots, bring together the right smart people at the right time to create an experience that truly impacts and helps people along their journeys.
So when you're looking at people or looking at your marketplace, do you see people sitting there struggling, recognizing they need to seek balance, or they're struggling, but they don't know exactly why yet?
I think people know that they need to seek balance, but I think the challenge is we oftentimes tell ourselves stories of why we can't achieve that and why we can't have that balance. And I think that, speaking from experience, oftentimes those stories are just that. They're stories that we tell ourselves, and they're not based in any sort of reality. And I fully understand and recognize that there are some circumstances of people where this, like, finding that balance can be very difficult. I fully recognize that. I also know, though, that for a lot of us, there are stories that we tell ourselves that prevent us from doing that. And it's almost like we're gluttons for punishment, and we don't think that we're worthy of that rest, or we think that maybe we can't do it because others are relying on us for certain things at work. But ultimately, when we find that rest, we show up better for everybody else in our lives. So yeah, I think that, to answer your question, oftentimes people think that we can't find balance, but we can.
Give me an example of a story we tell ourselves as to why we can't find balance.
I can't take time off of work because my team needs me. There's this project that's going on that I'm essential for, that if I am not on the client call, the client's going to freak out. The team's not going to have direction. So my presence is required for this project for the next 4 months. That's an example that, I mean, I've fallen guilty to that many times before. I've rescheduled vacations when I was in the consulting world because it was like, oh no, I need to be here for this project. The team's not going to carry on. But ultimately, when you step away, you actually give people the space to continue to grow and to own a little bit more. And I think it helps you also realize that maybe you aren't as needed as you think you might be, which is a powerful thing to wrap your head around and accept and actually embrace.
All right. So you're saying that many people are out there, they're in pain and they know they need balance. What are some of the things they do
to find balance?
To find it, other than the stories they tell themselves where they don't find it. But what are some of the things they do besides, of course, going on a retreat or something like what you do? What else do people do?
Yeah, there's been this explosion in what I'll call the wellness world over the last few years. It's been really just inspiring and invigorating to see when you're seeing these studios pop up. Like I'm out here in Los Angeles, and there's all kinds of studios that pop up that do the like sauna and cold plunge, so they call it contrast therapy between the two of those things, like hyperbaric chambers, all of these different types of wellness modalities that exist out there now that you're starting to see people like dabbling in and experimenting with. And I think that's a beautiful thing because ultimately each person's different. The things that we like are different. The way our body responds to things is different. But we're seeing this proliferation of different mediums that we can use to be able to help our bodies, to be able to help slow down our minds and keep that connection going between the two.
So maybe the difference between that is something they do while they're still working versus maybe taking how long are your retreats?
7 days.
So they could either take 7 days off. And do you find what's the percentage of people who just, is it 100%? Is it 99%? Like, what's the percentage of people who all of a sudden are different when they leave your retreat than before?
100%. It shifts your perspective. It helps you see things in yourself and the world that you can't unsee in a really helpful way. And when we go back, we do provide a lot of guidance and assistance for people when they come home too, as far as how do you continue these practices that we engaged in while we were together. Because what we impress upon everybody on the retreats is that magic that you found and experienced during the retreat, that doesn't have anything to do with what we did from a curation perspective. It had everything to do with what you as the guest did by choosing to show up, by putting in the work and engaging in the different activities. That magic's within you. It's always within you, and you can access it at any time if you have the right tools in order to do it.
Love that. I've been thinking a lot about the do-it-yourself, done with you, done for you, right? By the way, so if you're in burnout, there is not a done for you formula, period. Mm-hmm. What you're doing is you're providing a curated experience, but I love what you said. I want to point this out for people listening, either now or later. You're providing a curated experience, and it's not the curated content. It's the inner work that the person who's there is going to do, and they will take that to the next level. You're just you're doing it with them. You're providing a framework, a playground, an opportunity for them to actually see who they could be if they let themselves be that person.
Yes. Everybody's on their own unique journey. And I think that when you have these like programs or companies that are prescribing, like only do like, this is the way you have to do things, or this is the way you have to do things. I struggle to accept that because each person is so different and we're all in different places in life. And what we want to do with Sand and Salt Escapes is create an opportunity where people can tap into what's true to them and help them meet them where they are on their own journey rather than prescribe any certain way. We kind of give a menu. And that's why we were trying different mindfulness activities, where we're doing breathwork, while we're doing sound, while we're painting. It's a bunch of different things to help you kind of figure out what resonates, what doesn't, and how do you continue that when you go back home.
So listen, if you're listening, you're watching, you're a high achieving professional that seeks balance. How best should people be reaching out to you, Max?
Our website is sandandsaltescapes.com. So you can learn a lot more about the work that we do there, or feel free to drop me a note. Personally, my name is Max. Email is max@sandandsaltescapes.com.
Perfect. So one last question. So based on how this conversation went and what you were able to communicate so far, is there a question I should have asked you that I didn't?
The question would be, how does this evolve? And where does this type of work go from here?
Oh, love that. Great question. Please ask yourself that question.
So as we've been rolling out and running these retreats, I've started to get a lot of interest from folks in my network over the last couple of years saying, hey, what you're doing is interesting. How might we integrate that with our organization? So we have started about 15 months ago, we started running offsites for executive and intact teams that are 100% focused on mindfulness. It is totally unique in the corporate space. There's nobody out here that's doing this kind of work with the intensity, intentionality, and at the level that we are. But we're getting a chance to sit down with executive teams and do deep work as human beings. And that's been such an amazing evolution of this work. I think it's so powerful because it's a place that, as we talked about, we're taught to see ourselves as titles. So to be able to bring some humanity back into the workplace has been a really meaningful thing for me. It's something that when I left the corporate world, I said, I'll never touch anything corporate again. I'm done with this. But as life has a way of showing you everything that you want or you think, sometimes turn out not to be true. And we've been able to do some really meaningful, impactful work in that space. And that's where we're really focused on growth with this next evolution of it is how are we helping more people and having a stronger impact in a place that I think in the corporate world tremendously needs it.
Well, great question. Great answer. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Max, really want to say thank you for opening up and spending your time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mitchell. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, mutual. So listen, if you're still here, you're watching, you're listening, take an aha moment that you grabbed from this episode, share it on your favorite social media platform, reach out to Max if you have particular questions. And thanks so much for joining us on Leaders Living Their Values. We'll see you at the next episode. Take care, everyone. Bye now.